Hey, greetings everyone. Today we're going to talk about a P0401 EGR error. I have a 2002 F150 pickup truck. It has the 4.6 liter 8-cylinder in it. And I bought it used. It has 120,000 miles on it when I got it. And this is my first major problem. I thought I'd do a little video to give you a review of what I found and how it got fixed. I like to try to understand these mechanical issues myself before I run off to a mechanic. A, because number one, I might be able to fix it myself and save some time and money. And if nothing else, I need to understand what the problem is. So if I do go to a mechanic, I understand if it got fixed properly and something else didn't get fixed, it didn't need to be fixed, and that sort of thing. I've had all too many bad experiences with professional mechanics in this area, so definitely pays to do my homework. In every regard, I spent quite a bit of time, probably 6 hours in all, researching this, using various F150 forums, and of course the YouTube, which is an invaluable source of information. There's quite a few guys, including professional mechanics, who took their time to show you how they diagnosed the problem and ultimately corrected it. The one thing I didn't see is a comprehensive video which gave you a complete overview of the EGR system, what you have to do to test the various components, and some general troubleshooting hints, as well as the ultimate solution. So I thought what I would do, since I have an engineering background, even though I'm not a mechanic, is just do this video which gives a complete overview of what the system is and what to look for. Just as sort of an all-in-one reference. So if you have this problem, you know exactly what needs to be done, and hopefully it'll save you some problems. In any regard, let's get started.
Hey guys, we have a 2002 F150 4x4 here with a 4.6 liter engine. And as you can see, we have the infamous service engine soon light on, which is a P0401 code. So I'm just going to show you how we get that determination by putting the scanner on. First of all, what I have here is a little Actron scanner I picked up on Amazon.com. This is the CP9575. It's a relatively low-cost unit, just not a full-time mechanic. It's just something I can check some error codes when I come up with having to run down to the auto store. In any regard, the first thing you have to do is turn your ignition on without the engine running, and then plug this connector into your data port, which in the F150 is right here to the right of the steering console. And it also powers your unit. Yes, communicate with the computer right now. Then we can just take and scroll down and we'll see the actual code it's returning. And here's the code. It says it's one code of 1. And it's a P0401. If you don't have your own scanner, you can probably head down to one of the mass corporate auto parts stores, and typically they'll scan your vehicle for you at no cost, just because they want to sell you some auto parts. Okay, I'll take the next step after this. Hey, we're looking inside the engine of a 2002 F150 4x4 with a 4.6 liter, and we have that infamous P0401 code, which is insufficient EGR flow. I just thought I would give you an actual overview of the components of the system, just so you know what they are, what they look like, and understand how they work together, because you don't want to just be taking guesses and throwing parts at things. So we'll just take a quick look at the components first, and I'll come back and tell you some more details about them. First thing, this is your EGR valve right here, and this bolts onto your throttle body, which is the metal part right here, and the throttle body's where your intake air comes in from your air cleaner and goes into your combustion chamber. The next component is this guy right here, which is the EGR regulator solenoid. And then, since EGR stands for emissions gas recycling, where we get our emissions gas is off of this EGR tube, which is this guy here. I don't know if you can see, but it goes way down here and connects to the exhaust pipe. And then it comes up and goes into the back of the EGR back here. And the other key component in your system is this little guy right here, which is your DPFE sensor. And you can see there's two tubes coming out of that DPFE sensor going into the EGR pipe. Okay, some more detailed notes about how these components actually work. Start with the EGR valve itself. As we noted back here, this is the EGR pipe which brings the actual exhaust gas up from the exhaust system. And like I said, this is a valve, so what happens is your computer, based on some formula, some logic, which we won't go into here, which I don't really understand anyway, determines when to open this valve. And when it does, the exhaust gas goes into your intake manifold, your throttle body, and mixes with your air for the combustion process. And the theory is that it's going to reduce some air pollutants. In any regard, the way this thing's actuated, there's this vacuum tube on the very top here. And so when vacuum is applied to the valve, it'll open up and allow the gas to pass into the throttle body. Now, the way the valve is told to open up is from the computer, but the physical mechanism is this EGR regulator, or EGR solenoid over here. And you'll see there's two vacuum tubes coming into this thing on the bottom. The red one is your source vacuum coming from the engine, and then the green one is the one that goes out and connects to the top of the EGR over here. And there's also an electrical connection which has two wires. One is a 12-volt reference, and the other one, depending on the design of your system, will either apply 12 volts or apply ground, and that causes the solenoid to activate and allow the vacuum to pass to the EGR, turning it on. And as I'm not sure, this is all controlled by the computer. Now, the DPFE sensor, as the name implies, it's a sensor, and what it does is it connects to the EGR tube down here, and in between here and here there's a little orifice in this pipe, and the sensor actually measures the difference in pressure between tube A and tube B and sends that data to the computer, and then the computer uses that data along with a lot of other data from the engine to determine when to turn the solenoid on to activate the EGR to let gas flow into your intake. So some of the things you want to look for in the troubleshooting process is, they say typically on these engines, 9 times out of 10 is the DPFE sensor has failed. And really, to test it, you either need to have a computer interface. There's 3 wires down here, and I believe the center one is the ground. One of the other 2 is a 5-volt reference. And then the other one is the 0 to 5 volt signal, and that's the signal that gets sent back to the computer. So you'd have to be able to monitor that with a voltmeter or a computer interface. And typically the more throttle applied to the engine, this is going to increase in voltage. I think when it's idling, it's typically around 0.3 volts. And when the engine's opened up, it'll go up around close to 5 volts at the peak. The thing to remember if you're going to buy this and just throw a part at it is to make sure you get a good quality one. Either buy an OEM right from Ford or get your premium brand at your auto parts store. A lot of auto parts stores, I just found out, will either sell a cheap brand and a premium brand, if you will. And sometimes they don't tell you, they give that option, so make sure you ask. And a lot of times the price difference isn't all that great. So probably the second thing you want to check is you can just remove this connector off of here. Just wiggle it off carefully. And then with the engine running, just put your finger over the hole on the right and you'll see if you have a vacuum. Or if you have a vacuum gauge, you can actually put the vacuum on there and see how much actual vacuum you're getting. Otherwise, unless you have a computer interface or really know what you're doing here, it's not easy for the backyard mechanic to test this guy. Typically what the pros will do, they'll put their snap-on computer interface here and they can actually tell the computer to activate this guy. And when it activates, you get vacuum over here, and you should also hear the engine bog down or stall. But the next thing you want to do is actually try that to see if you can apply vacuum directly to here. If you have a hand vacuum pump, just take and pull this guy off and put your hand vacuum pump up here, and with the engine running, apply vacuum. And this engine should start running very rough and actually should probably stall on you. The other thing you can do is, I just pop this guy off of here, and I have a little hose connector. I run the vacuum, I pull it right off this red and put it on the top And that's a way to get vacuum right off the engine if you don't want to go out and spend money on a hand vacuum pump. In any regards, if it's not the DPFE sensor, the other big problem is it's probably clogged somewhere. And watching the other professional mechanics on YouTube, they say when it's clogged, is just about everybody I've seen, the problem is in this throttle control body. And what they actually have to do is they take all these hoses off, pop this throttle control body off of there, and clean the carbon out from the port, the EGR port. And I've seen some videos where it's just practically caked over solid, and it takes a lot of physical effort to get this stuff clean. Most of the guys, the shade tree mechanics, seem to be able to do it in 2 hours, although I think the mechanics book says to replace the gasket on the throttle body is a half-an-hour job, so you'd have to add whatever time to do the actual cleaning for a professional mechanic to do, so probably an hour. The other thing, if your throttle body is clean, I guess in theory it's possible that your EGR tube is actually clogged, and that's the part you're going to have to get from the dealer. I've never seen a video where they've had a case where the EGR tube was clogged. However, the so-called quote-unquote mechanic I took this thing to, he just started throwing parts at it, and that's the first thing he replaced on there. Charged me $60 for the part and $120 in labor, and I got a mile down the road, and guess what? The P0401 code came right back on. Anyway, I kept telling him, I said, when you apply vacuum to this guy, it makes the engine run rough, but it doesn't stall it. Therefore, my assumption is that the problem is indeed in the throttle body being clogged. But in any regards, where we're at right now with this engine, and I talked to another mechanic who I trust a little bit more, and he agrees with my assessment. He says, although it could also be the EGR valve itself, it's not completely opening when you apply the vacuum to it. So we'll see what he has to say, and then I'll give you an update on this. Hey, I'm going to take a minute here and show you how I actually use the source vacuum from the EGR regulator to apply it to the EGR valve itself, just to see if the EGR valve being actuated causes the engine to stall. So just take and wiggle this guy loose. Of course, it's just plastic and rubber, so you want to not be too forceful with it. See, as you can see, it's just two holes here. As we mentioned before, the red's your source, and the green one goes over to your top of your EGR valve. So we're going to go ahead and pop this guy off. Once again, just wiggle it and pull it up. Okay. I have this little hose which came with my vacuum tester, so I'm just going to basically put this end into the source and then use the other end to apply to the valves. Let's see if I can do this with one hand here. Just enough to get a good seal. And my hose came out here. Okay, I'm going to put the camera down, and I'm going to go ahead and fit this hose in here and then start the engine and apply the vacuum. We can't start the engine with the vacuum applied because it probably won't start if its EGR valve is functioning properly. Be right back. Okay, the engine's running. We've got the vacuum hooked into our source here at the regulator, and I can feel the suction vacuum when I get my finger in it. So I'm just going to apply this to the top of the EGR valve. Theoretically, if the whole system's working properly, this engine should stall on this. You can hear it's running rough. It's not coming anywhere near to stalling. Okay, I went ahead and applied vacuum gauge against that line, and as you can see, there is a good vacuum on this. Okay, well, as you can see, we had good vacuum. The engine shut off now, and when we applied the vacuum line to the top of that EGR, the engine did run a little bit rougher, but didn't come anywhere close to stalling. So that means there's a blockage somewhere, or possibly the EGR valve's not opening properly when it's got vacuum applied to it. So we'll take it from here, let you know how we make out. Another tip for you, if your vehicle has quite a few miles on it, when you're messing with the EGR, you might want to check what they call the mass airflow sensor. And this is the actual wire for here. And it goes down, it's on the underside of this air intake tunnel. And what you need to do is just take and unclip this guy. You can take a screwdriver, loosen this clamp. You can take this apart. And when you take this out, you'll see the little sensor in there. It's just like two small wires. Looks like very small resistors on them. And a lot of times what happens, they'll get dirt on them. And they're very sensitive. And there's a special product called mass airflow sensor. CRC makes some. It's pretty expensive. It's around $8 a can. But just take this guy out and spray that pretty heavily. Don't ever touch it with the end of the nozzle or your hand or a screwdriver or a Q-tip or anything like that, just the spray. Then let it dry and put it back on. This particular vehicle was idling really fast, about 1200, 1300 RPMs, and it's running a little bit rough too when you're sitting at idle like at a red light. But as soon as I cleaned that mass airflow sensor with that spray, idle went down to about 650, 700, and it idles very smoothly now. So $8 and probably half an hour's worth of your time. Be something to take a look at, especially with high mileage vehicles. Don't mess it up though. I understand it's an expensive part.
Hey, just got back from the new mechanic shop. I found this guys were pretty highly recommended, so I gave them a shot to get this P0401 error solved. Where we had to conclude it was basically, my opinion was that it was either the EGR ports in the throttle body were clogged with carbon, or the new mechanic suggests there's a possibility that the EGR valve wasn't opening far enough. Although typically, I understand that the EGR valves, when they do fail, they'll fail in the closed position. So, but it was something to consider. Anyway, what we're looking at here is a picture of that throttle body, the bottom side. And this was the problem. You'll see those two round holes that are all black there. That is carbon. Those are the EGR ports. So just like all the good mechanics on YouTube told us, if the system's clogged, it's probably right here. Now the first client I took it to replaced that EGR tube. It cost me $240 in parts and labor when it wasn't the problem. And even though I pointed it out to him 4 different times that, in my opinion, based on all the testing I'd done, it's probably this throttle body being clogged, he just insisted it was, and he tells me that he ran a mechanic's wire through it and it was fine. Even though these ports take a hard right turn, there's absolutely no way you can run a mechanic's wire through that thing. The only way to properly do this is to take it off and clean it. And that's something I didn't want to tackle myself because, well, it's just I don't like crawling inside of that hot engine, and I just don't feel comfortable with it in any regard. These guys charged me $120 to take this thing off of there and clean it properly, and with the new gaskets for the throttle body and the EGR valve, and about 3 hours of time. So that's what it was. So hopefully if you have this problem yourself, I've given you some good oversight here about what to look for. Unfortunately, I got burned 3 times the price it should have been by with an incompetent or crooked mechanic. Actually, I think he was crooked because he tried to tell me that all 4 of my ball joints needed replaced, and I looked at him and I didn't see a problem. I also asked these new mechanics to look at it, and they also said they all look fine too. So unfortunately, these rotten apples are out there, and I got burned. And it's just not really worth pursuing it in small claims court, and they seem like pretty nasty people, so I don't want to really deal with them anymore. Just leave it at that. In any regard, if I can make some time here, I'll go out and put that vacuum back on the EGR valve like I did before. And now with this thing cleaned out, that engine should very closely come to a stall, or actually stall, just to show you what a properly functioning system should, how it should test. All right, hope this helps. Good luck with your problem.
Hey, we're back outside, and as I noted, this F150 has just come from the shop, and they completely cleaned the EGR ports on that throttle body, so the system is working as it was designed to work. And what I want to do is I've hooked up my vacuum hose to the source vacuum again. I'm just going to go ahead and put this on top of the EGR valve like I did before. Now with this thing working properly, this engine should either stall or just about stall at idle when you apply vacuum to that EGR valve. So I haven't cheated, I haven't tried this myself yet, So let me go ahead and put the camera down and start the engine, and we'll see what happens. Okay, here we go. Here's the vacuum line going on top of the EGR valve. I can find it. You can hear how rough that thing's running now compared to the first time we tried it. Alright, there you have it. That's what it should sound like, at least on this F150 with the EGR system and properly working.
Hey, just a footnote about that test I just did. I think probably the proper way to do this is to use a hand vacuum pump so you can make sure that you fully open that EGR valve. As you saw, I just tapped onto the vacuum source at the EGR regulator, and that may not have been enough vacuum to fully open it. Plus, I didn't have those temporary connectors in there tight. I didn't want to take the chance of stretching those boots out that go into the regulator and having a loose connection for the future. Anyway, just want to make that note. Hope this helps you with your problem, and I'll see you guys next time.